Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to Feed the Master series. As you can tell from the previous episode, the setup has changed. It is due to the fact that during the Polish Junior Championship that I went to as a coach, I got sick in the meantime. Therefore, with the amount of work I had there and with sickness, I was unable to record any more recaps for you. So the yesterday's one is as it is, but I am back at home after the trip, after the sickness, so I am hoping to record all of the recaps that I owe you guys. So that's that, and without further ado, let's jump into the video because today we are going to discuss as many as 3 games of mine, so let's jump straight into them. In the round number 3 of the Santa Semana Open, I faced Ibrahim from Spain, rated 1965. As you can tell, the similar rating opponent as in the two first rounds. So whenever you don't win first rounds, that's what you got. So yeah, I've decided to omit any opening preparation that he might have against me, and I decided to go with knight f3 followed by b3. Not that harmful setup, but at the same time the one I quite like when I want to avoid any opening fury. I saw that my opponent is the most likely to go into the setup of d5 c5 as we got during the game, and two things I looked at was that after e3 knight c6 I will be willing to push d4 because whenever he takes I will be happy to take back with the knight, not allowing him to build a strong center with e5 because at the end of the variation the pawn will be hanging, and for that reason I was not afraid of e5 move. And if so, the only other thing I had to check was the move e6 because I saw that this is the setup that he normally chooses, and in here I've prepared move a3. a3 covers the b4 square, therefore I am allowed to develop the bishop to d3, so it seems like a natural setup and development, and my idea for the game was that if my opponent takes now, which he did in the game, and develops normally, I will do that too, and within few moves we will get to such a position in which my idea is very simple. I would like to play queen e2, knight e5, pawn f4, rook f3, leave the rook through the third rank and then attack on the king side. So my plan and idea was pretty straightforward and actually quite dangerous from the human standpoint. So even though e5 move took me by surprise, after some time I figured out that okay, it's a natural way of playing for my opponent, even though this is once more a type of position that I would love to get, and I was happy to exchange everything. If I was not happy with that move, perhaps I can change a move order and play knight e5 straight away, but I was happy with it because after the exchanges on the e5 square I can then achieve basically the position against the isolated queen pawn, which I like playing with, playing against it, so I was happy with the outcome anyway. And even though after a3 natural move, bishop d7, knight f3, rook e8, computer does not give me the biggest of the advantage in the world, I was very happy. In here I believe I still had an hour and 30 minutes because I didn't have to use any time for thinking, to be honest, in the opening stage, and queen d2 was also a natural move, so I knew that only after my opponent's move now I will have to think about what to do in the nearest future. My opponent also developed the queen to the c7 though, and yeah, what should I do now? The only pieces of mine that have not moved yet are the rooks, so I figured out okay, I might already try some queen moves, but why do I have to go for it so early? I can first of all bring one rook into the game, then the other, and see how it goes. So that's what I did, and my opponent wasted no time and went straight away for the active approach. What I will say about this kind of the position, obviously with the isolated pawn, black is forced kind of to go for the activity. However, with the two pairs of light pieces already exchanged, I was happy with my chances. Knight e4 though was, as I've said, natural way of playing, but after queen b4 I would say that my opponent went too far with the activity, because in here he had to show some patience still. Instead he went for queen f4, which only looks scary when in reality it's of no danger to me, and there are no specific threats other than bishop takes h3. So obviously I saw that, and then I found queen d4 move, which is not the best according to the computer, but I felt like from the human standpoint, it's a very nice move. I am keeping an eye on all the important squares in the position, and also I am indirectly protecting myself from the bishop h3 threat, because I can make use of my double stack on the d file, which at this point is not that visible, but after bishop h3 I can take on e4, and if d takes, I have queen d8, making use of the weak black king. And if that's the case, at this point I imagine that my opponent will try to either solidify the knight on e4, which would be the most obvious way to go around this position, because not only the knight is protected but also the pawn, and now I would have a tough choice practically, either to take the pawn or not, because okay, I will be getting a pawn advantage, but in exchange for misplaced queen, or would I rather continue with some calmer approach? I would decide during the game. The other way of playing for my opponent that I was considering was either of the pawn pushes, so that in the scenario that I am shown already, the king would not be such a weak one there on the 8th rank. However, to my surprise, my opponent chose neither of those three options I just shown you, but went for g5. And I felt like g5 is just overpush. You should not try this at home. Even if bishop h3 would be a strong possibility, such moves come with big responsibility. And in this scenario, it's no difference. I would say that g5 is simply not being able to deal with the pressure, and yeah, even tactically it's not really working. I can simply take the pawn on d5. I was expecting my opponent to play a move along like bishop c6 idea, so that after any move of mine there would be some tricks not on h3 square but rather f3. So I had calculated some lines in here. To my surprise though, he continued with the bishop h3 approach, which is simply not working in here. As I've said, I cannot take that way anymore. Also, the rook already attacks my queen, so it's a little bit different scenario to the one that we saw already previously. But the obvious way for me to continue in here is to play rook takes e4. Maybe that's something that my opponent missed, but whenever you are pushing g5 and sacrificing on h3, you really have to take into account all the possibilities, even if this is not the most logical one at first because my queen is hanging. As a player playing black, you have to take into account all the forcing moves, and rook e4 is one of them. The idea behind it is that whenever my queen is taken, I can take his queen, and after gf4 I can take the bishop at the end. And if the scenario is different, if my rook takes here, then I can deliver the check. And well, there are not so many other scenarios. If the queen takes, I can take with the bishop, then protect the queen, and so on. So pretty easy line that my opponent have missed probably. And after rook d4, rook f4, g4, g3, as I've said, this happened in the game. I am clearly winning, even though my position might be only bishop and the knight versus a rook. The black pawns are also misplaced. I will be having a great coordination around my pieces. So all in all, pretty easy win. So I will just play out the moves so that you will see how the game resolved, because one more funny thing is that my opponent kind of got himself into the mating net at this point, because after bishop c4 I am threatening with c3 nearly checkmate. Okay, king can go away to e5, but yeah, it's nearly there. Obviously the maneuver of the king was a desired one in terms of the attempted activity, but as I've said, objectively it makes simply no difference and the king is weak anyway. So my opponent played for a few more moves. He gave a check, he went away to f5, but the point is that after c3 check, king has to go back because I've created such a great shield against him. And if he goes back, now I have the discovered attack to the rook, and in here it's simply winning for me. And finally, he resigned. So pretty straightforward win. I didn't have to calculate much, think much. Pretty happy with the result and the amount of time I spent at the chessboard, because as I've said in the previous video, I was in no mood to play chess overall, so happy with such a short win. And with that, I would like to introduce you to another game I played during morning round the next day with black pieces this time. However, the strength of my opponent did not change as much because I've played a woman FIDE master rated still below 2000 FIDE rating. Nevertheless, I knew that it will be a tough game because she was playing systems with white that I didn't quite like against most of my choices. So for that reason, I decided to shuffle up the move order once more, as you saw in the round number 2 in the previous episode. In that episode, I chose knight f6 followed by d6. In here, I went for d6 straight away. The idea behind this move was that whenever she chooses c4, as she normally would in most of her games, I would play e5, hoping to exchange the queens very early, avoid any opening phase, and go straight into the middle game, in which I hoped to outplay my opponent. And if she goes for the other lines, for example like knight f3, then I will be happy to switch to King's Indian because she played Samish variation, and I've mentioned during the previous episode that I don't quite like facing it. So I thought that I am smart with that move, and e4 caught me off guard a little bit because I've said to myself, okay, instead of playing, Samish variation of King's Indian or any other variation of King's Indian, we'll be playing simply the Pierce defense. So I went for knight f6, and as you can tell, basically we got what we would after e4 d6, d4 knight f6, which is the Pierce defense. So I was happy with that, and I continued rather quickly. So after f3, I said, okay, I will continue with g6, getting into the normal Pierce defense, and only after a move I figured out that my opponent out-tricked me with the move order instead of other way around, because now she played c4, transposing to the Samish variation of the King's Indian if I went with bishop g7, knight c3. So I was like, oh man, I wanted to be smart, I kind of got it what I wanted, but then in the end, instead of thinking for at least half a minute in here, I went for g6 and went into the Samish. Obviously in here, if I want to avoid that, the way to go would be to play e5, once more inviting my opponent to this kind of the endgame, and if she refuses to do it, then the position will be simply different to the Samish variations of the King's Indian. But if I played, and when I played the g6, c4, we are getting it. So in order to mix things up a little bit, instead of going straightforwardly to bishop g7 move, and instead of going for e5 that you saw in the round number 2 from my side, I decided to go for the c5 with the hopes of getting unusual structure for the, let's say, Samir variation of the King's Indian, but more usual for the Benoni, if you know what I mean, after d5, e6 and so on, because I remember that my opponent does not play every kind of variations against the Benoni, so I hope that at least this will be my attempt to out-trick her, and it kind of worked, even though it was a bluff, in a sense that after dc5 I would really be not sure what to do. Should I allow the trade now with this scenario? I was unsure about it. Should I give a check and take back with the queen? I didn't know either, but I was just bluffing. I kind of expected my opponent to push d5. It is a common theme against Spanish players, at least from what I saw in the preparation, to push the pawn anyway, so that's what I've got. And after e6, she played knight c3, takes, bishop g7. I get the Benoni type of structure that I don't like, but I just hoped and prayed that my opponent will not like that either. So overall, the opening experiment did not work as planned, but well, we are here to play some chess. I was in unknown territory, and I hoped my opponent is too, but I felt like she's playing well because she gave a check that I know that exists in the structures, with the idea that if I cover with the bishop, now she can just go away somewhere and my bishop is misplaced, blocking the knight and so on. And if I go with knight b to d7, I expected move a4, because after a6 once more the bishop can go away like somewhere, and even though it seems like she wasted the tempo, she might have gotten some good thing about it. I don't really remember what exactly I was thinking, but I felt like bishop b5 move check was smart. I covered the check with the knight anyway. Then she continued with bishop f4, hitting my pawn. I was scared for a second that I have no good way to protect it, but queen e7 is the obvious choice, thankfully, even though you don't usually like such dynamic of the best piece protecting the worst one, but I was happy with that. And only now she played a4, which, as I've said, I felt like it's natural. I castled, and now she played knight h3. So even though on the move number 7 in this position I felt uncomfortable, and I felt like all the moves that she chose were more or less good ones, suddenly I felt like something might be off, might be wrong about this position, because I got away from the pin. She wasted kind of the moves, and I didn't waste mine on a6. So she played against it, but I didn't even started to prepare it. I spotted that this knight move is also maybe not the best, because I get the idea she wants to reroute the knight to f2 square to protect this pawn and so on, but also it kind of gets under the attack of the bishop. I remembered basically only one idea in those structures, which is knight h5, f5, and this bishop is also looking kind of misplaced. So even though at first glance what white did was perfect and fine and so on, all of a sudden by playing natural moves as knight e5 with this threat, knight h5 with the attack to the bishop, and then f5, I found my pieces in all the best squares I could possibly develop them to. And while opponent wasted 2 tempos on the bishop, 2 tempos on the knight, king is still in the center, and I was happy. So what did she do wrong? I didn't know during the game. Only after the game I checked that since that's the problem, for example, with this bishop's placement, since this did not accomplish that much, in here she's supposed to play more like this, trying to stop my knight from activating and so on. So that's one thing I knew after the game, but during the game I didn't know what was wrong with her setup, but I got this position and I was over the moon. So in here already she's in a tough spot, even though computer gives only 0.4 evaluation in my favor. White has some big practical problems and decisions. The biggest one is that whenever she castles short, which is the usual case in here, I would be happy to just simply play f4, block the position, maintain the control over the dark squares, over the center, get the space here. So I have pretty straightforward idea, attack on the king side to this king. So it is very, very unpleasant to face. And if that's not playable, what else can she play? There are not so many moves, to be honest. EF obviously simply loses. I can say double attack, like no comment on that. It's simply winning for black. So whenever you are under pressure, you mostly go for the tactical resources. I'm not saying it's the good way to go about it. I just know that I tend to do it, and my opponent did that too in this game particularly, because she went for f4 move, trying to hit my knight and ask where is she supposed to go, because if I am forced to go back, in here apparently white would be kind of okay, because it does not allow my f4 push, but unfortunately for my opponent I have knight g4 move, which is on the first look not that natural, but it just works. Simple as that. Chess is a concrete game, so it works. I caught my opponent with no castle, with the e4 pawn being attacked, with the defenders being undermined and so on. So I'm basically just getting the material advantage in here. And I'm on the verge of winning, actually. So even though castling was looking so bad, perhaps objectively this was the way to go. f4 simply maybe not loses yet, but puts white in a very, very dangerous spot. After knight g4, my opponent exchanged on g4 and played g3. Seems like white is alright, but as I've said, it's not, because of the undermined defender. So even though usually I would not like to exchange such an amazing bishop, in here I am getting the pawn for it, so it's worth it. So that's what I did. I took on c3. Funnily enough, bc3 was an interesting choice for white in my opinion, because after queen e4, king f2, king is kind of okay here, because bishop protects the f4 pawn, so there are no sacrifices. And if that's the case, maybe somehow the bishop pair with the open e-file or whatever makes some problems to my king later on. So practically I would have to be precise, let's say. Bishop c3, which my opponent chose in the game, felt okay too. objectively, I mean, objectively I'm still on basically winning, but computer does not see the difference. But human-wise, I felt like it's a worse decision, because after I take a pawn, now king f2 is not a possibility, because I can sack on f4 and my heavy pieces will be easily checkmating the king. And if that's the case, king d2 is the only possibility. But king on this side of the board felt like it would be much more weaker. So basically, since during the opening I was kind of forced into few moves, then I found one and only idea that I had in mind, so knight e5, knight h5, f5, and after f4 I saw this variation beforehand, so I basically blitzed everything out. I got into this position, and this was the first position in this game that I really had to think about what to do next, because I knew that I was perhaps winning already, but I have to be precise. For example, I was really unsure if I want to take such pawn. Okay, pawn is a pawn, so I would have two of them, but one is simply enough at this stage of the game for me. And also, is it okay to take this pawn if it means that I am leaving the light squares like that aimed towards my king? I was not so optimistic about it. So computer maybe can take it. I'm not sure what's the evaluation. Yeah, it even dropped. So as you can tell, practically it's not that easy. And human wise it would be even harder. So I had a choice in here between, okay, this move I can disregard, but I can perhaps develop my bishop, hit this one, maybe give a check. So few different choices to consider. And in the end I decided, okay, as I've said, I have one more pawn, it should be more than enough at this stage of the game. My only practical problem might be with the underdevelopment and the king's safety. So I decided to fix that, and I started with the bishop f5 move, trying to continue development. And after king c1, which was kind of expected from my opponent, now I played a6, trying to kick away the bishop. If she went away with the bishop like that, I would be going for the full activity, full development. That's what I hoped to get, but she played rook e1, very nice move, after which I had to calculate previously what to do. And from the distance I saw that queen e2 should be more than enough. I thought that still she does not have a good square to go to with the bishop. For example, bishop f1 might be met even simply with taking this pawn, maybe the next one, maybe the next one. So even though I am taking the white pawns in front of my king, I have plenty of defenders there, so it's different to taking this pawn, let's say. So it was of no harm to me. And rook e2, which I felt like might be played after queen f3, there are no more attacks to my queen, and so if my queen is safe, the bishop has to move somewhere. And all I saw was basically bishop c4, after which I had b5 move, after ab takes, the bishop will be simply lost, because in here I am going with nearly the checkmate there. And I was not expecting anything else from the distance, so I was kind of surprised why my opponent is going for rook e2 variation. And only after I've played queen f3 I spotted her idea, which was rook a3. A very interesting one, because if you focus on my queen, I have nowhere to go. So if the bishop moves somewhere, my queen will be trapped. So for a second there I was a little bit worried, but my position is so overwhelmingly better. It basically cannot work that well as she would wish to. And so I just calculated the line that after taking the bishop, the only way for her to sacrifice the bishop in a good fashion would be to play bishop a5. If she attempts, like, I don't know, maybe bishop e1, I have rook takes a4, after rook takes f3, I have the check, I take her queen, I take her rook, I'm winning simply. So in order to avoid this idea and so on, she has to sacrifice the bishop on a5. So in order to get my queen, she actually gave me two light pieces and a rook, and connecting this with the fact that I was few pawns up and her king itself is not that great, I'm still simply winning. She went for some activity, I just take a pawn with the threat, she took mine, and I switched from delivering the check on a1 to c4, because I knew that after king d1 I was having this knight f6 possibility, bringing the knight into the game, threatening with this and all that. So pretty good position. And if she went to d2, I figured out the variation of rook c2 check. If she goes up, well, no human will ever do it, but once more knight f6 with the idea of knight g4 this time creates a very good mating pattern. And if she goes down, now I have rook a8, a very funny way to introduce yet another piece into the attack. And this is the moment when my opponent resigned the game. So as you can tell, pretty straightforward win, even though especially in the beginning it didn't seem like it. Thankfully though, my opponent misplayed the opening, even though neither of us knew that. So I'm happy with that, 2 out of 2. And this was the morning round, so I was in the good mood heading into the round number 5, second of the day, hoping to get my third win in a row. Will I achieve that? Let's see already as of now, because I'm going to show it guys to you guys. Alright, so as you can tell, even though I won 2 games in a row, I am still minus 18 on the rating, so winning all those games were not that rewarding in that sense. So I just wanted to still be able to crush my opponents. And this time, once more, another guy below 2000 rating. And funnily enough, he went for the exact same variation as my opponent from the round number 1, during which I drew the game, right? If you remember, after crazy line of knight b5, bishop f4, bishop b4, bishop f4, takes, queen f3, and so on and so on. As I've said during the yesterday's analysis, I've learned my lesson, and this is exactly the game in which you will show why and how, because I changed the approach completely. Instead of going for the pretty straightforward, sharp line, forced and all that stuff, I decided to go for the simple a3. So I learned my lesson, as I've said, and I avoided bishop b4 move. And this is for those two reasons. One being I wanted to avoid forced lines. Second one, I chose this specific move, not any other that I can play, obviously, outside of knight d2 b5, because I saw that in one of the games my opponent went for d5 idea, creating the isolated pawn. And as you can tell already from this video and a few others before that, I am in love with such scenarios and structures with both sides. And in here it was no different. Even though my opponent went for bishop e7 first, I knew that after bishop e3 it is still one more chance for him to play there. If he wouldn't do it, I would perhaps consider f4 move, trying to make him look quite passive, but we got it guys. He played d5, and I'm not sure if you are following the channel closely, but in the episode number 29 I've played very similar game and variation in which I missed out on a win due to bad endgame technique. So even though it was due to the endgame mistakes, I still learned my lesson, in a sense that in here I chose most precise way of playing than in that game I'm referring to, because in that game I went for knight ed5 I believe, and after knight d5 here I played move like bishop d2, and then I outplayed my opponent in the middle game, and then in the end game I didn't convert. But putting that aside, at this moment I knew that bishop b5 would be a better move than the ed5, because of the fact that after bishop d7 bishop covers the queen, so now I can take on d5. And the most natural way of playing this for black would be to take, and after castle, we just have a healthy normal setup, which I just simply like to play against, and we would see what would happen. However, in the game though, my opponent chose knight takes d5, which I'm even more happy with, because after takes, castle, we got such position instead of this one. And as you know already from my previous analysis, in general, a side with the isolated pawn should avoid exchanges. So the fact that he willingly exchanged the knights was great for me. And I knew that in such scenarios I would like to go back with the bishop to d3, so I did that. Bishop and did his job on b5. Now it was under some pins, so I just went away and I'm looking in the direction of the king. And actually I have some direct threat of queen h5 hitting both here and there. So already on the move number 12 I'm asking my opponent some questions. How is he going to deal with the pressures I'm adding to him? And after g6, this was the first moment in which I spent some time actually, but the move I've played was the one and only basically candidate that I was considering, because I've played queen f3. It was a move that I anticipated from the distance, and also I anticipated that my opponent has a possibility of giving away the d5 pawn for the counterplay, for the activity. But I felt like my opponent would not be so happy to go in such scenario. I'm referring to the knight e5 move, so that after I take on d5, he can exchange on d3. So yeah, he is without a pawn, but this is this pawn, so an isolated one playing against the bishop pair, and even though as of now it does not look so appealing after some simple b6 move, bishop f6 move, bishop, like I don't know where, somewhere, the pressure to those points of mine would be so big that it should be enough to claim the compensation for the sacrificed pawn, but it's uneasy even if you know the evaluation afterwards. So during the game it would be quite a risky decision, and without it, it's quite hard for the opponent to find any other healthy looking move, because I'm actually attacking this pawn. So in the game I thought that maybe bishop e6 is not the worst in the world, because if I take and play queen h3 with the attack to the pawn, after queen d6 I evaluated this position as quite a good one for black, in a sense that after he will be able to push e5, he has a very strong pawn center, and even my bishop pair might be unable to fight against it. Surprisingly, at least for me, computer evaluates this position as much better for white, but human-wise, I'm not sure if I would be willing to go for it. So after bishop e6, I would be perhaps thinking about maybe playing some normal developing move. We would see. However, I expected knight d4 to be played on the board, and that's exactly what we've got. So my knight was taken, and I was happy with that scenario, because as you can tell, more exchanges, the more I am happy with those. And not only that, actually, since the kingside pawn structure is weakened, since there are no knights to defend those, and my bishop is so amazing, I am actually the one that will be creating pressure, even though I am without the isolated pawn, so presumably without advantage of space and all that, right? So that's funny dynamic in here. My opponent chose bishop e6. I knew immediately that it's yet another inaccuracy, so the third one in the last 5 moves, I would say. The best move would be to play bishop c6, because in here the bishop is much better. Okay, it's not the most active in the world, but he's not active either on e6. But on e6 he might get under some tactical problems, which we will see later on. As you can tell, Ivar did not like that move, but I felt like it's very human of me to develop yet another piece into the initiative and attack. Computer suggests that I should go immediately for queen f4 with those threats on the dark squares and follow it up with the h-pawn push, as normally engine would love to, but I felt like introducing a new piece is also a great idea. And in here my opponent basically collapses very quickly. He chose rook e8, which I don't quite understand. The rook should belong to the f file, so that she can cover the f7 weakness in some variations and all that. In here, if I have plenty of choices, I can try to double stack my rooks. Now I can think about queen f4, but what I am happy with is the fact that I found the best move, aiming straightly at this rook, which is bishop b5. The idea is that if he goes back, well, we'll see how it goes, but after bishop d7, I have few options. First of all, if I am not happy with the exchanges, I can simply go back, and he is forced to go back either this or that way, and I'm keeping my initiative. Note that I cannot take the pawn right now because of takes, and my bishop is lost. So I have this possibility, I have this possibility too. This time looking at this pawn, and perhaps this would be the objectively best scenario for me. However, in the game I calculated mostly rook e7 with an attempt to checkmate the opponent. If rook takes queen f6, I am basically checkmating him. And if the queen takes, now I can take on d7, because I am deflecting the queen from protecting the f6 square. So after this move, I am nearly winning. Nearly, because king can go to f8. And funny enough, I don't have any push, any attempt to checkmate. Like, I can give a check, he goes back. I go back, he go back. I go here, he runs away through the dark squares. And I don't have any other introducing move, right, of a new piece. So what I found though, and I'm also very happy with this move, is bishop e3, with the idea of delivering the checkmate on the king side. And after rook takes, I thought about either f takes e3, and I hope that my heavy pieces activity will be enough to win the game, or I can also go for such line in which I'm hitting there and also hoping for some winning chances, especially since the king is in the center. However, as you can tell from the evaluation, things were far from being so simple, because in here actually I misevaluated the situation. Black would be having good chances for equal endgame due to the fact that, well, it's heavy pins endgame, so activity is the key, so he can try to activate his rook, hit my pawns too. So yeah, not so straightforward, but as I've said, after bishop b5 was on the board, if bishop was on d7, I would recalculate this variation. Perhaps I would go for the alternatives, so hopefully I would choose the right path. But after rook f8, I mean, I'm in heaven, because I calculated the line basically until the end. So what is it? Well, the winning move is queen f4. Basically, black wasted 2 tempos, while in that time I managed to make 2 placements of my pieces better. And after queen f4, I'm putting my opponent in danger in, as I've said, those scenarios. And thanks to the double stack on the e-file, those bishops will be also under the attack. And there is simply no way for the opponent to protect everything. He attempted queen d6 to suggest a queen trade and protect the bishop, but after queen h6, f6 is the only move stopping checkmate, and if the f-pawn moves, now this bishop is a weak one, so I go back with the queen to e3, king f7 is the only way to protect it, but since, as I've said, both of those bishops are weak, I have one more deflection motive in here, which is bishop c5. If the queen takes, I take the bishop, king goes away, I take another one, so as you can tell, it was very crucial to not have this bishop on e6. And if the queen goes to e5 as in the game, I have one more nice trick for you guys, because after bishop e7, if he exchanges the queens, I take, he takes, and I play rook e1, once more taking advantage of that. And if he takes king to e7, I have check to c5, so I'm discovered attacking the heavy pieces of the opponent. And if he goes to d6, I have one more deflection motive, because after this move, if he takes, I give a check, king has to go from the defense of the queen, I get the queen, I get the win, and if the queen e5 is played, I can take, and even though it seems like, okay, black might hold on for a few more seconds, I have c4 move, opening up the king completely, winning the game easily. And for those reasons, this was the moment in which my opponent resigned the game. As you can tell, once more I cruised through the whole game. I didn't have that many variations to look at, to calculate. I just chose much more suitable variations and structures for myself. Therefore, the games went quite smoothly. So such win made it 3 out of 3 during 3 straight rounds during this whole video, because as you can tell, I showed you all the 3 games in a row. And I guess that I was back in the tournament, even though I still had minus 15 on the rating list. I felt my confidence is back, and I knew that after those 3 wins, I would be getting finally a better opponent that I will be facing. So I was excited to play the round number 6. And if you want to know how did it go, please remember to subscribe to the channel, because the analysis will be tomorrow. And if you liked those 3 crashing queens from myself today, please leave a like, I will appreciate it. And with that, thank you all for watching. We'll see each other shortly, means tomorrow. Thank you and bye bye.